All right. Well, another year and another Ohio State loss to the Michigan Wolverines, this time at home, this time as 19.5 point favorites. Uh, by ESPN, the biggest spread in the rivalry since 1978. Um, and it's official. Ryan Day is now John Cooper 2.0, Ohio State coach who famously finished 2-10-1 against Michigan, and it is time for Ryan Day to go. You give him the benefit of the doubt with the cheating and all that, but he's completely squandered that. It's all gone now. I was willing to believe that they only beat you the past few years because they were cheating, but how am I supposed to believe it now? I know that this game has nothing to do with the previous three games, and technically those three games didn't have anything to do with one another. They're all independent games, their own variables and context and progressions and all that stuff. But if you lose four games in a row to your rival, whether you want to see it or not, there's a trend there. So then you ask yourself, is the Ohio State team not good enough? Is Michigan just a better team? Have they been better all 4 years? And what explains it? Well, I'd be with you if you said Michigan was the better team last year. 2021 probably as well, but 2022 I don't think so. And this year, absolutely not. I mean, we all have eyes. This was a 6-5 Michigan team without its best corner, without its leading receiver, Colston Loveland, best player on their entire offense. There's absolutely no reason to lose to this Michigan team. You were at home. You were 19.5 point favorites. And I'm seeing a lot of Ohio State fans jumping on Chip Kelly for this. I'm not convinced that Chip Kelly was the one that came up with this offensive game plan in the play calling. I don't know. Until he comes out and fully says that it was him calling the plays, not Ryan Day, I'm just going to assume it was Ryan Day because this this has Ryan Day's fingerprints all over it. This is classic Ryan Day. And even if it was Chip Kelly calling the plays, then why didn't the CEO, game manager, head coach Ryan Day intervene and fix it? Why did he just sit there and watch the ship go down? That's his job, right? Isn't that your job now that you've given up play calling? You're supposed to be overseeing the entire team, managing the entire game rather than just burying yourself in the play sheet. So there's two questions there. If he was overseeing the entire game, Ryan Day, then what exactly was he looking at? Because it was clear to everybody that it was not working. I was watching this game with my cousins, and we were all wondering, like, why does he keep running it, east west into the boundary? Why does he keep running to the short side of the field? But if the blame is on Chip Kelly, then what is Ryan Day? Just a bystander? I don't get it. Doesn't the buck stop with the head coach? There's really no conceivable reason for this Ohio State team to play like this against Michigan. And I don't even really want to get into the X and O's. Maybe I'll do a game review of this later, but I mean, this is not, I feel like focusing on the game and the plays themselves really is missing the whole point here. I think it's not like you can talk about, well, if they would have done X instead of Y on this play, you're really just missing the forest for the trees here. This is not a micro. This game was a micro result of a much bigger macro issue. And I think that macro issue is that Ryan Day is coaching against Michigan with an overwhelming fear of losing the game. And he actually admitted this during the week. We didn't really notice it at the time, but he did. I'll get the full quotation here. He said, quote, "We felt like it's not to win. We felt what it's like to not win this game, and it's bad," Day said on his weekly television show. "It's one of the worst things that's happened to me in my life, quite honestly. Other than losing my father and a few other things, quite honestly, for my family, it's the worst thing that's ever happened. So we can never have that happen again, ever. That's been the approach all season." In light of what happened during the game, that quote should have sounded the alarms. That should have been a 5-alarm fire. Because this game is so deeply in his head and has him so badly rattled that I don't think he actually has the capacity to approach the Michigan game as a football coach. And that's how the unthinkable happens. And what happened on Saturday, that was the unthinkable. So my two theories here on what went wrong with Ohio State and why their offense was so horrendously bad. 0 targets for Jeremiah Smith in the second half. The first thing is that Ryan Day, the first possibility is that Ryan Day was trying to prove a point stubbornly that he could run on Michigan and win the rushing battle and beat Michigan at their own game, which again, it's flat out on its face idiotic, since you're basically saying that you're gonna toss all your best advantages out the window. But I don't think it's entirely implausible, because if you remember back to the 2021 game, this one here, that was when everybody started calling Ohio State soft, finesse. I think that's when Ryan Day's mental spiral really began, and that's kind of when the rivalry broke him. And so I think he's just been more focused on being perceived as tough and a physical football team than he actually has on. It's an ego thing. His ego, he took a direct shot after that game. I don't think he's been the same ever since. Now the second thing, which I think is more, well, I don't know if it's more likely, but I think it's also a distinct possibility, is Ryan Day was just so frozen with fear that he just didn't intervene at all as Chip Kelly was leading the bus and was careening off a cliff, because Ryan was terrified that if he took over, he would screw it up and lose the game. And I think he hired Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles to win this game for him, to do it all for him. But I don't know if this is likely, because this really just didn't feel like Chip Kelly. Maybe it was. Maybe, I don't know. He's only been at Ohio State for 1 year. I'm not super familiar with him. Maybe people who are more familiar with Chip Kelly can expand on whether he has a tendency to do this. Maybe he has a reputation as this offensive genius, and he's arrogant, and maybe he just stubbornly commits his original game plan, based on this idea that his superior intellect and genius will prevail. I don't know, but I guess it's possible. But then again, I've also seen this Ohio State team this year make some really nice adjustments to the game plan at halftime, and my gut is just telling me that this was not a Chip Kelly type of game. It like I said earlier, it feels like it's got Ryan Day's fingerprints all over it. It just doesn't. My gut feeling is that this was not Chip Kelly. But overall, I mean, the whole game really just felt surreal. It was like the whole time, you're like, how is this even happening? The clock is ticking away, 1 quarter gone, 2 quarters gone, 3 quarters gone. You're like, how is this Ohio State team, which has been dubbed as the best collection of talent in Ohio State history, losing to one of the worst Michigan teams in recent memory? It felt surreal. It just felt like, it felt like almost like a bad dream. And I'm going to start getting into maybe some psychoanalysis or psychobabble here, but it feels like the Michigan game now for Ryan Day has become this self-fulfilling prophecy, because he is so fixated and obsessed with not losing that he actually makes it happen. And the self-fulfilling prophecy, the definition is, it's a psychological phenomenon that occurs when a person's expectations or beliefs about a situation lead to actions that make those expectations come true. Now let's go back to what Ryan Day said before the game. We felt what it's like to not win this game. And then he said, so we can never have that happen again, ever. Ryan Day is fixated on not losing to Michigan, by his own admission. He said that, not me. I'm not reading between the lines here. That's what he said. To not win this game, he is obsessed with losing to Michigan. He's obsessed with not losing to Michigan, but the idea of losing to Michigan consumes him. And that's the self-fulfilling prophecy. He's so focused on not losing to Michigan. Like, he's basically just telling himself, don't lose to Michigan, don't lose to Michigan. You ever hear like the expression, don't think of a pink elephant? What pops up in your head? A pink elephant. And so Ryan Day's mind is just, don't lose to Michigan, don't lose to Michigan, don't lose to Michigan. What happens? He loses to Michigan. He's just paralyzed with fear over losing to Michigan. That he's forgotten that football is about beating your opponent, and not losing and beating the other team are very different things. Ryan Day had the NIL collectives bring back basically all the seniors who could have gone pro. They went out and got these great players in the transfer portal: Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins, Seth McLaughlin, who wasn't playing the game, but Will Howard. He got Chip Kelly to be his offensive coordinator. Pretty extraordinary move at the time. And he did all of this to make it impossible to lose to Michigan. He wanted to give himself as big an advantage as he could. And I think more than that, he was almost trying to outsource the Michigan game to other people so it wouldn't fall on his shoulders. He wanted to basically be along for the ride rather than driving the bus against Michigan, because he was so, I guess he had no confidence in his ability to win this game. So he just figured, let Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles win this game. Or I don't know. That's my theory. But again, Jim Knowles did an incredible job in this game. It almost, I could see it going the complete other way, where Ryan Day was such a control freak that he, overrode Chip Kelly's, because they were running a bunch of stretch into the boundary stuff, and that's not Chip Kelly, that's Ryan Day. So I don't know. I just go back to, it just feels like Ryan Day. This feels like it's got his fingerprints all over it. Doesn't feel like Chip Kelly. Doesn't feel like something Chip Kelly would do there. And so meanwhile, Michigan loses tons of players from last year's team, most of their coaching staff. Jim Harbaugh, strength and conditioning coach, are without their most important offensive player, Colson Loveland, and either their most important or second most important defensive player, Will Johnson. And they still beat you in your building. One thing that I can think of maybe that would explain why the play calling in this game and the game planning were so bad is the Will Howard head injury. I think he was concussed, and somehow they were able to clear him and put him back in the game. And I think that could be why the passing game didn't look as crisp, didn't look as, put together. And that's also why you barely saw any quarterback runs, when basically in a situation like that, where your offense isn't working. If this was Urban Meyer, he would have taken JT Barrett and ran him like 25 times. But you didn't see that many quarterback runs from Will Howard, and I think possibly the head injury had something to do with that. But still, even if Will Howard's not 100%, does not excuse you from losing this game. It's an incredibly mediocre Michigan team. That Michigan team was 4-5 against Power 4 teams, and it easily could have been worse. They easily could have lost to USC. They easily could have lost to Minnesota. This Michigan team, it's like, even if you had to pull Will Howard and put in Devin Brown, that's still a better quarterback than Davis Warren. And this Michigan team was mediocre. I mean, you saw them play really good teams. You saw them play Oregon. You saw them play Texas. Texas and Oregon both went into the Big House. Basically, these are two teams that are like the same caliber as Ohio State. Went into the Big House and beat this Michigan team. Texas won by 19. Oregon won by 21. And Vegas was basically expecting Ohio State to do about the same. Except Ohio State only scored 10 points against Michigan, which is the same amount of points that Fresno State scored against Michigan in the Big House. And the only team that scored fewer points than Ohio State did against this Michigan team was Northwestern last week. I mean, that's just, USC found a way to score 24 points on this Michigan team. Minnesota found a way to score 24 points on this Michigan team. Everybody found a way. This Indiana team that Ohio State just beat the piss out of a week ago found a way to score 20 points on this Michigan. And they couldn't do a thing for the entire second half. They still found a way to score 17 points on this Michigan, or 20 points on this Michigan team. This was such an uncharacteristically bad performance. Like, this was like Ohio State playing at like 60% of their potential, and Michigan, Michigan played a good game. I didn't think they played a great game. They had a bunch of turnovers, but this was just, you could not have played worse in this game. 10 points against this Michigan team. you're here to talk about, well, this Michigan team has a really good defense, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Then why did every other team other than Fresno State and Northwestern figure out how to score more than 10 points against Michigan? This Michigan team had no road wins this season until they came into Columbus and won. 0-3. They were 0-3 on the road. This really should have been the layup of all layups in the history of the game, or at least as much of a layup as the game can ever be, because very seldom is Michigan just going to come into the game with no juice at all, like they did in the Rich Rod era. I mean, a rival team can always beat you if you give them an opening, but generally, even in rivalry games where they say throughout the records, the better team is going to win the vast majority of the time. But if you give them an opening, they're gonna take it from you. I mean, again, this should have been the slump buster of all slump busters. And I thought there was a good chance that Michigan, I thought this game would be close at half and Ohio State would pull away in the second half and probably cover that 20 or 19 point spread or whatever it was. But the idea of Michigan just straight up winning the game was just outlandish. I thought Michigan would score between 6 and 13 points, with 13 pretty much being their ceiling. I didn't think they'd be able to score 2 touchdowns. I thought they might be able to score 1 touchdown and 2 field goals. I thought they'd get at least 2 field goals, which they did. And I thought there was, a chance that they could get a touchdown, but not a very high chance. And really, the only reason they got that was because that interception, where they got the ball back on the 2-yard line or whatever it was. But for Ohio State, I thought they would have, between 24 and 30 points, at a 20 at a bare minimum. Like, I thought worst case floor scenario for Ohio State was 20 points in this game. But I guess with Ryan Day calling the plays and running the show, all things are possible. Michigan offensively looked about like I expected them to, maybe a little better than that. This is basically like the best scenario imaginable for them. Getting that interception with the ball on the 2-yard line, which running that play, that the first interception where they ran a sideline out on 3rd down, that Michigan just jumped. They knew exactly what was coming, and Stallions isn't even there anymore. That's just very predictable. And then later in the game, Michigan started having success because Ohio State offense was just, 3 and out. They couldn't stay on the field. And eventually, your defense, you're putting your defense, and also the Ohio State special teams was atrocious. So you're putting the defense in bad situations for most of the fourth quarter. And I don't blame the defense at all, because eventually, you're gonna get gassed when you're continually on the field the whole time. And it's the fourth quarter. I'm not even going to blame the Ohio State kicker who missed 2 extremely makeable kicks. I mean, that's just very obvious why he missed those kicks. He missed those kicks because, A, he probably knew his coach was terrified and it bled over to him. And the other thing is, Ryan Day has never had a good special teams. He's always had special teams issues. And for him to not come into this game with a reliable kicker is just unconscionable. It's unconscionable. I just, especially, I mean, this is a guy who lost a national championship game 2 years ago because he didn't have a kicker. And for him to not address that position, I mean, you think about the Georgia game from a couple of years ago, and all the stuff that Ryan Day has said about learning from his mistakes and leaving no doubt and making sure we were able to get those that last few percentage, because we've been we've been right there all season. He left the kicker. I mean, what are you doing? I mean, you never had a good kicker, and I just think, the fact that Ryan Day's had such terrible special teams at Ohio State is really just a sign of not having attention to detail, and really, beyond that, a fundamental misunderstanding of how important special teams is. It really just seems like special teams is an afterthought to Ryan Day. He doesn't really care who he rolls out as kicker. And the fact that Jim Tressel was in the stadium for this game, watching from the suite, I bet Jim Tressel was just beside himself watching how awful the Ohio State special teams was time after time, because when Tressel was a coach at Ohio State, special teams was like his hallmark. Punting was his thing. But I really just think overall, Ryan Day, he's the press conference warrior. He says all the right things. He talks all off season about, oh, we've been a play or two away, we're losing all these close games. He set out to fix that. He wanted to leave no doubt, quote unquote, in these games. Yet he's already got 2 losses this season. Both of them were extremely close games where his team was unable to make that last play in the moment that separates winning from losing. The Oregon game came up just short. Michigan game come up just. I mean, everything this guy, he says the right things, but you just don't see it on the field. Overall, really, this is just as unbelievable and shocking a loss as you're ever going to see. I think if you took these exact players and coaches from the Michigan team and put them in Wisconsin uniforms or Illinois uniforms, Ohio State wins this game, probably covers easily. But the moment that Ryan Day sees the maize and blue and the winged helmet, he just melts into a puddle, goes into the fetal position, starts hyperventilating, breathing into a brown paper bag. Like he just he gets like Vietnam flashbacks over Michigan or something. I don't know. And I think there's just this massive mental block for him about this game that you just have no choice if you're Ohio State but to part ways with him. He's too terrified of losing the game. It almost reminds me of like John Lester, who pitched for the Cubs and the Red Sox. He couldn't throw the ball to first base at all. It was completely mental. Obviously, the guy's a pitcher. Couldn't throw the ball to first base at all. And I think he was just so deep in his head about it. He just overthinking it. Eventually, you just completely lose control of it. And in players, we diagnose this all the time. We have a word for it, and it's called the yips. But we never ask ourselves, and I think this is interesting, we never ask ourselves if coaches can get the yips. And in my opinion, what's going on with Ryan Day in the Michigan game is a classic example of the yips. He's so traumatized and shell-shocked by what's happened in the past and the death threats and the toxicity he gets from the fan base when he loses this game, how hard it is on his family. He basically just freezes up. It just, the idea of losing to Michigan is so terrifying to him that he cannot handle it. He cannot handle his responsibility as a coach. He's overcome with this terror and fear. It's like, coaches talk all the time about blocking out the noise and not paying attention to what people say. Ryan Day is basically the exact opposite of that. He's blocked out the game itself, the actual game, and is focused entirely on the outside noise and criticism. Again, I go back to the quote during the week that should have set off the fire alarms. He is obsessed with not losing to Michigan. The only thing going through his head is don't lose to Michigan, don't lose to Michigan, don't lose to Michigan. He doesn't even think about beating Michigan. But I just think that nobody took that quote seriously because of just the assumption that there was just no way that this Ohio State team could lose to Michigan in Columbus. But I think in hindsight, we have to look back at that quote and really see it as the illumination of I mean, that was the fire alarm. I mean, that should have really set the alarm bells off and told us just how badly this game is in his head. Thing of it is, I don't know if it's actually Michigan he's afraid of. I think it's really the Ohio State fans and their reaction when he loses this game, and all the backlash he's going to get. And I just think that he is just so down bad over this. I feel like you could give him the Kansas City Chiefs dressed up in Ohio State uniforms, and he would still find a way to lose to Michigan. I think that's how bad it is. This is basically as lopsided of an advantage in the Michigan game as you're going to get at Ohio State, maybe outside of the Rich Rod years here from 2008 to 2010. I mean, you look at it. This is, Ohio State was +4 on the win column this year. They had 10 wins coming to this game. Michigan had 6. That's the biggest advantage since 2014 when it was 5. And being a 19.5 point favorite is the biggest since 2014. 2008, 2014, and then 2024. The 2008 year, they won by 35. 2014, they won by 14 points, and this year you lose. It's just crazy. It's just crazy, and I don't think. I mean, you have the biggest advantage, and your defense played really well. It's just Ryan Day's side of the ball. And again, I'm not blaming the defense for this at all. When Michigan's a team that runs the ball 50 times a game. Eventually, if you cannot get out to a lead and force them to abandon the run, your run defense is eventually going to break. If a team runs on you 50 times in a game, your run defense is eventually going to break. It's very easy. Or it's not very easy, but the game plan to avoid that is to get a multiple score lead on Michigan. You get up 14-0 on them, or you get up 14 points on them, and they have to abandon the run. That's how you avoid your defense just getting pounded by the run 50 times. And the big thing is the fact that Ohio State wasn't able to do that, the fact that they weren't able to force Michigan to abandon the run. There has not been one time in the past 4 years where Ryan Day's Ohio State team was able to dictate the terms of this game to Michigan and impose their will on Michigan. They've never been able to force Michigan to play the Ohio State type of game. They're always playing this game on Michigan's terms. And to me, that's just a result of coaching scared, especially when you have a more superior roster. It's overthinking, it's abandoning your identity. It's basically just saying, Jesus, take the wheel, and I hope it somehow works out for us. The Ohio State offense was progressively worse as the game went on. It's like basically the pressure was mounting and mounting on Ryan Day, and he just melted down, and the meltdown just accelerated and got worse. I really, bottom line, I just think Ryan Day cannot handle the Michigan game. I think he just melts into a puddle, and that's why he's got to go. I think it's something that's in the best interest of not only Ohio State, but it's in the best interest of Ryan Day. I mean, because obviously if you have a coach that can't win the Michigan game, well, it's in the best interest of the Ohio State fan base to get rid of that guy, because winning the Michigan game is kind of important. But for Ryan Day, I just think this is clearly something that has a massive impact on his mental health and his well-being and the well-being of his family. I don't think he should do this job anymore. I really don't. I think it's too much for him. I don't think he's cut out for it. Which, look, I mean, like, if it's really this bad, then just I don't know. I mean, I was really mad at Ryan Day at first, but now I'm like, dude, you need to just get away from this, man. Just go somewhere else and be away from it. This is clearly not good for your health. And the crazy thing is that, this is a 12-team playoff era, and there's never, like, this game does not really affect Ohio State in any way. Yeah, I mean, it's going to affect their seeding, but they're already in the playoff. So there was actually like less pressure on Ryan Day to win this game. And again, I know that, the Michigan game has never really been about the implications for the postseason, although often it is. Often there are postseason implications, but between like the fan bases and the team, I mean, this is about just like two programs and two fan bases that just despise each other's guts. And this game is always for bragging rights and pride, but I mean, what I'm saying is there is less pressure on him to win this game. I mean, it's not like your whole season was on the line here. It's just really your pride and your you know what I mean, the whole state's pride. And obviously, again, there's a lot of emotions riding on this game, but it's not like this would kill your season if you lose this game. And he still just let that pressure just get to him and just crush him. And again, I just think it's too deep in his head, and him and Ohio State, there's got to be a split here. It's not going to get better. You look at John Cooper. John Cooper started 1-5 or 0-5-1 against Michigan. And if we look at the John Cooper era down here, I mean, loss, 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 loss. I mean, okay, so he went 0-4, then tied in 1992, then lost 93. So you're looking at a guy who started 0-5-1. Guess what? He finished 2-10-1. It didn't get better. And you can't keep that guy around. I mean, this is very Cooper-esque. Like, this is, you look at the 95 game, in the 96 game, 95, Ohio State is ranked second. Michigan's ranked 18th. They go to Ann Arbor. They lose that game. Ohio State was a 9-point favorite. 96, Ohio State's ranked second. Michigan's ranked 21st. You lose 13-9 at home. Very close score to what you saw here. Ohio State was a 17-point favorite in that game. I mean, this is extremely Cooper-esque. And that 96 game, if you win that, they would have split the national championship with Florida that year. Obviously, this year Ohio State still has a chance to win it, but you can't really have much confidence in Ryan Day going forward. I mean, how does this affect him mentally? And I think this loss is even worse because, as you see here, Michigan was ranked 21st in the 96 game. They were unranked this year. That's even worse than John Cooper's lowest moment. You know, this is like, there's coaches in this rivalry who win games they're supposed to lose, like Jim Tressel in 2004. Michigan's ranked number 7. Ohio State's not ranked. Ohio State goes out there, wins 37-21. I think about 2018, Urban Meyer was 6-0 coming into this game, the 2018 game, and this was the year that Ohio State lost to Purdue. Michigan was ranked number 4. They had supposedly this amazing defense. They were on their way to the playoff. It was going to be, Harbaugh's first time. They were going to send Urban Meyer packing. Harbaugh was going to win the game. And they just come out and just get blitzed, 62-39. Urban won that game. That was the only time that they were actually favored that Michigan was favored over Ohio State in the Urban Meyer tenure. And then you had 03 and 04 where Michigan was favored to beat Ohio State, and Tressel got the job done in 04. There's coaches that win games that they're supposed to lose in this rivalry, and then there's coaches that lose games that they're supposed to win. And Ryan Day is the guy, and you can see here, they were favored in 2021, they were favored in 2022, they were favored this year by obviously a lot, and he lost 3 times as the favorite. So he is a coach that loses games that he's supposed to win. And that's what John Cooper did. Both of them, of course, not being, Ohio-born guys. And go over to this here. Take a look at the records of the Ohio State coaches who were born in Ohio, or like Earl Bruce. Earl Bruce played at Ohio State as a player under Woody Hayes. And then later became the head coach. He was originally from, I think, Maryland or something like that. But Earl Bruce, I mean, he had way stronger Buckeye roots. If you played at Ohio State, that's like being born in Ohio, right? That's enough. I get it. But, 2 guys with no prior, connections to Ohio State. I guess Ryan Day was there for a couple years before. But the Ohio guys, Urban, Tressel, Earl Bruce, Woody Hayes, combined 37-16-1, 68% win rate against Michigan. Then you got Ryan Day and John Cooper, 3-14-1, winning 16% of their games against Michigan. And I think you need an Ohio coach. And maybe this is specific issue to Ryan Day, that he is just unable to handle the pressure of this game. And I think, even if he was at Alabama, right? And he lost to Auburn and multiple times, and because Alabama fans would do the same thing as Ohio State fans. If Ryan Day, got that kind of harassment and treatment after lose, I think the same thing would be happening. I think he'd be paralyzed at the sight of the War Eagle. But he's at Ohio, and we also do have a history of an Ohio State coach, John Cooper, unable to get the job done in this game. And let's go back. John Cooper lost some real bad games to but he also had, a lot of the time, John Cooper didn't have the better team, right? He loses in 1988, unranked, 12th ranked Michigan, 1989, third ranked Michigan, 20th ranked Ohio State. 1990, that's a close game, but Michigan was still ranked higher. 91, you're ranked number 18, they're ranked number 4. So a lot of the time, John Cooper is going up against much better Michigan teams than Ryan Day. Now the 93 game, you're ranked 5 and they're unranked and they beat you by 28. Yeah, that's atrocious. So again, John Cooper had some awful losses in this rivalry, but he also had to go up against a lot tougher Michigan teams than Ryan Day did. But I just think coaches who grow up with this rivalry, coaches who come from Ohio, I'm sure they're somewhat afraid to lose this game, but I think that they just are consumed with beating Michigan and destroying Michigan, and rather than this fear. I think Ryan Day, people talk about he doesn't understand the rivalry. I think he does understand it. I think he understands it extremely well, but he views it from the perspective that I'm going to let everybody in Ohio down. I'm going to let all these Ohio people down if I lose this game. Whereas, Ohio coaches are internally motivated to beat Michigan. They want to beat Michigan just as much as, any random person from Ohio, right? Because they're Ohioans. So I just think as an outsider, there's so much more pressure on you to not let everybody down. Whereas, a guy like Urban or Jim Tressel or Woody Hayes, they're also going to get the benefit of the doubt when they lose this game. It's not like it's okay, but it's well, we know that this guy did everything he could, so we're not going to attack him like a bunch of crazed, like a crazed mob outside of his house. And I don't even think this Ryan Day this is about emotional and mental well-being. Again, I think Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel probably had some level of fear about losing this game, or gosh, man, it's going to really suck if we lose. But I think Ryan Day, I just think he's unable to handle the pressure of being a head coach at a big-time program. Again, I'm just talking about the Alabama example. If he was the Alabama head coach and they lost 4 straight to Auburn, 3 straight to Auburn, then he lost to 4 straight, I think he'd be going through this exact same thing if he had another fan base that was similar in nature to Ohio State like Alabama is. It's not about Michigan. It's not about, I don't even know if it's about the Ohio State fans in general. It's about whether this guy, Ryan Day, is able to handle this job and the stress and the pressure of this job and the expectations. It's like Urban Meyer used to always say, it's life in the big city. And it's the pressure of having a big time elite college football job. And I just don't think that Ryan Day is able to handle it. There's a handful of jobs out there in the country where the pressure to win is just so immense that you'll get crushed by it if you're not able to handle it. And Ryan Day, his own admission, he's most concerned about the backlash and fan toxicity he'll get from losing to Michigan. It's by far the worst against Michigan, but it certainly happens in other games. And I just think that the Michigan game, because he knows how important it is to other people and he knows how much worse the backlash is going to be, that's why he just freaks out and loses it. So, you know, you've got to go in a completely different direction. You cannot have this is, this is not a place for a first-time head coach. This is not a place to learn on the job. This is a place for somebody who's been there, done that, and knows what it's what it's like to be a head coach and the pressure that you're under, and is ready for that pressure and able to handle it. And listen, I don't even know if anyone can handle it. And we'll get into this in a second, but I don't know if anyone can handle that pressure for very long. And so again, for the better interests of Ohio State and Ryan Day, there needs to be a parting of ways here. I don't think this is good for Ryan Day's health. Obviously, Ohio State fans want a guy that can win this game. I think it would be mutually beneficial to both sides to part ways here. And so, who do you replace him with? Mike Vrabel. I know people are like, well, he doesn't want to coach in college. Maybe, but it has to be Mike Vrabel. It has to be, unless you want to talk about bringing back Urban Meyer, which I think that's even less likely, but it's got to be Mike Vrabel. It could have been Luke Fickell, but his stock's really low right now with how badly he's doing at Wisconsin. Marcus Freeman, I'd like him. I like what he's doing at Notre Dame. I feel like I'm seeing the most athleticism and explosiveness at Notre Dame than as I've ever seen in my entire life, basically. We were told that Brian Kelly maxed Notre Dame out. Well, I see a lot better players at Notre Dame now than I ever did at Notre Dame when Brian Kelly was there. And obviously Brian Kelly is stinking up the joint down there in Baton Rouge. So I like Marcus Freeman. I do also think that he kind of needs a little more experience. Notre Dame is a high pressure job. I don't think it's as high pressure as Ohio State is. So I think I'd pass on Marcus Freeman for now. He's a little too young. Same thing with Brian Hartline, James Laurinaitis. The thing is, nobody has ever, basically in the past 70 years, 74, 75 years, nobody at Ohio State has ever gone out on their own terms. Always ends badly, pretty much. Woody Hayes, he stuck around a few years longer than he should have. Got fired after he punched a Clemson player during a bowl game. Earl Bruce got forced out in 1987. John Cooper, they let him stick around way too long. Went 2-10-1 against Michigan. Eventually got ousted. Jim Tressel had to famously, his resignation was kind of a disgrace with the whole tattoo gate thing. Urban Meyer, I guess officially he retired from the job, but I think really he left Ohio State because Gene Smith and the university president at the time did not support them. They didn't support him. And he felt like they kind of hung him out to dry, threw him under the bus, so Urban Meyer left. And now Ryan Day, I mean, unless they win a national championship, this is not going to be a pretty ending for Ryan Day. So this is what I'm saying earlier about, can anybody actually handle the pressure of this job? No, I don't think so. But some guys handle it better than others, and I think Ryan Day does not handle it well at all. Really, I don't think he. Well, I wouldn't say at all, but I don't think he can handle it because you're judged on the Michigan game, and this guy could not hit water if he was falling out of a boat against Michigan. He couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Like I said, you can give him the Detroit Lions. You can give him an NFL All-Pro roster, and I don't think he could beat Michigan. I think he would somehow steer that ship into an iceberg. It's really, really bad. I think, again, he is just so upset. Like, he is obsessed with not losing to Michigan and his self-fulfilling prophecy himself into losing to Michigan. This was like the layup year. This was like the impossible to lose year, and he somehow found a way to lose it. It would be like if America tried to invade Afghanistan or some country and lost and oh wait, never mind. Sorry. Um, anyway, it's like you can't lose this game. It's just crazy. But anyways, back to Vrabel. I think he could handle the pressure of the job reasonably well because I mean, number one, he's a hard ass. Like he's the ultimate hard ass, and nobody would ever say shit to him because it's Mike Vrabel. And I don't think he would get as much because he's an Ohio guy and a Buckeye player, former Buckeye player. I don't think he would get as much criticism from the fan base because nobody would ever say it to his face, but he gets a lot of grace and leeway as a Buckeye because nobody would ever question whether he gets the rivalry or whether he's sufficiently committed to it or whether he hates Michigan enough or whether he understands what it means to Ohio State fans to win this game every single year as they become accustomed to. There would never be any doubts, about where about where his head was as far as this rivalry. But I think in terms of like actual tangible things, this guy's got 3 Super Bowl rings, major credibility in recruiting, assuming he can get a bunch of good position coaches in place. But he's got NFL coaching experience. He's been in the NFL for many years. He's been to the AFC Championship. He's beaten Belichick and Brady in the playoffs. He's won a Coach of the Year award. I mean, he's got that coaching experience coming into this. And I think really what you're looking for is a guy who's the polar opposite of Ryan Day. You've got Ryan Day, soft finesse, country club. Never, ever, ever would hear that with Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel is like hard ass, culture, toughness, accountability, intensity. This is the stuff that Ryan Day talks about this with Mike Vrabel. It's for real. That's the stuff that he lives. I mean, this guy was a member of the Patriots for many, many years. He played for Bill Belichick. I mean, this is exactly what you want. A lot of times, you see it all the time. Presidential elections, pendulum always swings the opposite direction. You go from a Republican to a Democrat. You go from, Barack Obama to Donald Trump. With head coaches, it's a lot of the same thing. You see it in the NFL. Well, you had an offensive guy. He didn't do well. Well, let's hire a defensive guy. Vice versa. College football, you got Ryan Day. You go to a guy like Mike Vrabel. Pendulum swings way in the opposite direction. You go from an offensive guy to a defensive guy. You go from a country club, soft finesse guy to a tough, hard-ass guy who's going to be playing smash mouth football and chewing people out. That right there is what I like. And then, again, Mike Vrabel has played football at Ohio State. Only one other coach can say that, and that was Earl Bruce. Again, other options here, Brian Hartline. I think he should stay on staff if Vrabel comes along, but I just don't think he's ready to make the jump to head coaching. We just talked about it with Ryan Day. First time. This is not a place for a first-time head coach. James Laurinaitis also in that same category with Mike Vrabel. Former Buckeye players who could be the head coach. Again, I'd put him in the same category as I'd put Hartline in, although Hartline has a lot more experience coaching right now than Laurinaitis does. But I think down the road, Laurinaitis will eventually be a guy who you would consider to lead this program. I think it has to be Vrabel. I think the only question with Vrabel is whether he actually would want to be involved in college football and deal with all the headaches of the transfer portal and NIL and the year-round calendar and that's a valid thing, but this stuff's kind of starting to get reined in from a legal standpoint, rules, regulations, and it's going to be a lot better in the future because it's basically the wild, wild west right now. But I mean, you're talking about you're going to have a great staff around you at Ohio State. You're going to have basically an unlimited NIL budget. It's going to make a lot of that a lot easier for Mike Vrabel to deal with. You're going to have a NFL style salary cap in college football eventually. So I think it's going to make things a lot more NFL like. And as the head coach, you really don't. I mean, yeah, you have to worry about recruiting, but your assistant coaches are the ones that do the bulk of the recruiting. Mike Vrabel could be, obviously he's going to have to be involved with it, but I don't think, as the head coach, you are, as in tune with the grind of recruiting as, like, say, the wide receivers coach or the tight ends coach or the, defensive line coach, stuff like that. Um, but basically, overall, I mean, listen, everybody's got a price. The boosters will pony up as much money as it takes to get Mike Vrabel, because I think everybody kind of understands right now that he's got to be the guy. 4 straight losses to Michigan, including, the most shocking and embarrassing loss in the history of rivalry. I think they will basically be begging Vrabel to take this job, and they will give him the Godfather offer. Basically say, we're going to offer you so much money that you can't turn this job down. You can't possibly do it. Plus, Vrabel's going to have the pull from being a Buckeye alumni, and the idea of coming back and righting the ship and making things right in the Michigan rivalry. I mean, he himself is probably just beside himself over the 4 straight losses to Michigan. So the idea that you can come back, ride into town as the white knight, on a white horse and save the day, I think that's very appealing. Come back as a hero. Again, that's I don't see any other option other than Vrabel. You could talk about Dan Lanning and all these other coaches. Just the fact that they're not from Ohio, I just think you have to get an Ohio guy in there. I think I've shown it before. I mean, it's very obvious who wins at Ohio State against Michigan, and I just think you need an Ohio guy in there. You do. And Vrabel is the clear-cut best choice of all of them. You could maybe talk me into getting Urban Meyer to come back. I would obviously be very happy about that if that happened. But I don't. First of all, I think he's much less likely to take this job than Mike Vrabel is. Although I don't know. I just think Urban is done with coaching. I think he understands that he burns himself out, and coaching historically has not been very good for his health. And I just think you got to throw the Godfather offer at Mike Vrabel. He's right up the road with the Browns, and I think he's got to be the guy. I mean, there might be some NFL jobs open for him. If you don't have a quarterback, I mean, he the only job out there for the NFL. I mean, there's going to be, the Bears are already open, and there's the Jaguars. But do you really believe in Trevor Lawrence? Do you really believe in that front office and that ownership structure? I don't know. The Bears, that's the same exact question. Does he believe in Caleb Williams? Would he get along with Caleb Williams? I don't think so. But the Bears also have a very incompetent ownership structure in front office. So I don't know. I don't think there's many appealing jobs that are open. Like the Cowboys probably open up. Is he going to go to the Cowboys? I doubt it. I don't even think I don't even think Jerry Jones would want Mike Vrabel, because Jerry Jones just wants a yes man. But bottom line, there's Vrabel. There's no candidate that's better than him. It's got to be him. You have to do whatever it takes to get him to say yes. You have to give him the Godfather offer. Get him to say yes, and come save your program here. And so that is going to be it for me. Those are my thoughts on the Ohio State Michigan game. I really just think that Ryan Day completely imploded, and I think that was it. You've seen all you need to say. This guy, you can't. I mean, it's clear the guy just melted it down. He had a full blown meltdown. You can't have that in the Michigan game. This guy, I mean, it's a very important part of being the Ohio State head coach, and this guy is clearly overwhelmed by it and is mentally spiraled to such a place where he's just incapable of doing this job. So that's going to be it for me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this video to be informative and good use of your time, hit the like button, consider subscribing. Appreciate your time. I'll see you in the next one.